Well, hope everybody had a good Christmas. And sometimes I was telling Betty Lou yesterday that sometimes it's sort of like a quiet week, but I'm going to be gone part of next week. So I figured I don't want to miss 2 weeks in a row. So I figured we would do this today. Plus, most of the books we're reading right now go pretty quickly. Today will go really quickly.
What is Habakkuk?
We're going to read Habakkuk.
And one of our most famous sayings is in there.
There is.
Yep. The Lord is in his temple and all the earth keeps silence before him.
There's also another thing that's interesting in Habakkuk. In chapter 2, there's a verse that Paul uses as reference for having justification by faith, which obviously is big for Lutherans. So it's an interesting connection with Habakkuk is the foundation for what Paul writes about justification by faith in Romans and a couple other places. And then Luther uses those things of Paul for justification by faith later on. So Habakkuk is sort of the start of that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And Habakkuk was written in, they're not exactly sure, but they think late 7th century to early 6th century BC, which would have put it right between, we talked about before how a lot of the prophets wrote either during the Assyrian invasion or during the Babylonian. It sounds like it's kind of right between those two. The Assyrian conflict is over, but if it's late 6th century, then the destruction of the temple and the Babylonians haven't come yet. So there may be some, signs on the horizon and stuff, but it's kind of between those two things. Not to say that it's not in recent history for the people too. So the book is pretty short. It's about 3 chapters, I think, 3 chapters. So maybe we'll read it all today. So there's a little bit of this, especially the first half of it is a little bit of a different type of literary device. It's the prophet talking with God, which is kind of interesting, and sort of negotiating with God in a way. So it's written in an interesting way. Yeah. So Habakkuk. The oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth perverted. Look at the nations and see, be astonished, be astounded. For a work is being done in your days that you would not believe if you were told. For I am rousing the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous nation, who march through the breadth of the earth, to seize dwellings that are not their own. Dread and fearsome are they, their justice and dignity proceed from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more menacing than wolves at dusk. Their horses charge, their horsemen come from far away. They fly like an eagle swift to devour. They all come for violence with faces pressing forward. They gather captives like sand. At kings they scoff. And of rulers they make sport. They laugh at every fortress and heap up earth to take it. Then they sweep by like the wind. They transgress and become guilty. Their own might is their God.
Hi, Cindy.
Okay, what verse you're on, because I can't find it. My wording's enough different than I have.
Oh, hi, Cindy. We just read verses 1 through 11 of Habakkuk.
Oh, 11. Okay. Yes, because mine didn't end with the same word, and so I couldn't figure it out.
So it says violence will come, or oracle judgment will be brought by the Chaldeans, which is the Babylonians,
Hmm.
an enemy of extraordinary might. So my Bible, I didn't know the Chaldeans was Babylonians, but apparently
Mm-hmm.
that's a reference. And we know, as I said earlier, historically that this is probably written between the times of the Assyrians conquest of the people and the Babylonians. But the Babylonians, like I said, it takes time for an army to conquer somebody. So it was on the horizon. It was within the next decade, which is pretty soon for them.
Yeah.
This happens with a lot of the prophets. They're told, if you're not careful, if you don't act better, this army that's over there is going to come through and conquer you. It's like a moral lesson. If you act better, then maybe they won't, but we know they do anyway. I find it kind of interesting that the enemy is, there's so much poetic language used with the enemy, right? The horses are swifter than leopards, more menacing than wolves at dusk.
Mhm.
It's incredibly poetic, especially considering it's the enemy that's going to destroy them, right?
Yeah.
And then sweep by like the wind. Any other questions in that first little section?
Mm-mm.
Are you not from of old, O Lord my God, my Holy One? You shall not die. O Lord, you have marked them for judgment, and you, O Rock, have established them for punishment. Your eyes are too pure to behold evil, and you cannot look on wrongdoing. Why do you look on the treacherous and are silent when the wicked sallow those more righteous than they? You have made people like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler. The enemy brings all of them up with a hook. He drags them out with his net. He gathers them in his seine, so he rejoices and exults. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and makes offerings to his seine. For by them his portion is lavish and his food is rich. Is he then to keep on emptying his net and destroying nations without mercy? Wow.
Okay, I'm gonna read verse 12 to me again because mine says something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Are you
my
not from of
NIV.
old, O Lord my God, my Holy One? You shall not die. O Lord,
Okay,
you have
mine
marked
says
them for
we will
judgment,
not
and you, O
die.
Rock,
Mine
have
says
established
we
them
will
for
not die,
judgment. What is
which
it?
it says we will not die, which I thought was very strange when you read it, because yours fits the verse better.
Mhm.
In ancient Hebrew, my Bible says ancient Hebrew tradition is we.
Oh, okay.
So it's gonna be a weird segue, but do you know what a seine is? S-E-I-N-E.
Mhm. No.
Like
Seine is a kind of a net. So my
Yes.
ex-wife is a marine biologist, and they mainly use two types of nets, trawls and seines. And a trawl is dragged behind a boat, and it has two boards that keep the net sort of apart, and everything that's in that path, in that line, gets captured.
Oh, okay.
But if it's not in that line, it doesn't get captured. It's a very important point. A seine is brought up on a beach, and everything in that area gets caught. Doesn't matter, everything gets caught because it's put on one end of the beach, on the beach, and another end of the beach, and it gets pulled up onto the beach. Everything in that beach, so it covers
Oh.
an area. So
Yeah.
if you understand how the net works, how the net, like the trawl, fish can get out of the way of a trawl.
mhm.
If they're not in the line, or if they see it coming, they can dart out of the way, but you can't get away from a seine.
Mm.
A seine is going to capture everything that is in its area. 100%. So to me, that's sort of significant of the verse, right? The enemy is going to get everybody. There's no chance of anybody not getting caught.
Yes.
And that last verse about how, when Babylon was conquering, Israel was not the first nation they conquered. We have the Assyrians and the Babylonians and other nations, they wiped through, and then the next nation wiped through them, and it just keeps going like this, right? And so they can see the writing on the wall that other nations have been conquered, and they're maybe not next in line, but they're not far away from being in line to be destroyed.
Yeah, my verse 17 says, will he keep on taking riches with his net? Will he go on storing people without showing mercy?
Yeah, that
So-
verse is pretty similar to my
Yeah.
What translation are you using, Cindy?
It's a youth Bible, and it is New Century Version.
Huh. Okay, thank you.
I should say this.
Mine is different too from Dan's, because I'm New International Version. I don't have a New Revised Standard Version.
Maybe I should just say this, as I probably should say this in every Bible study. I personally have multiple different translations, but I generally on the Bible study only read from the NRSV, because it's funny, it's sort of a weird thing, but almost every denomination has their own favorite translation, and they're all different.
True.
The LCA is primarily NRSV. So if you heard this on Sunday morning, it would be from the NRSV. Like I said, the translations aren't vastly different in terms of, they're all different, but they aren't, the end result on what it's saying isn't too different, but the words used are different. Sometimes I'll use other translations for special occasions. But in the Bible study, I typically, my own personal Bible, I often read the Message, or I read the New International Version when I'm at home, but NRSV is generally what I'll do here, because that's what we use in church. So there is a sense here that they can, like with some of the other prophets we talked about, especially with Isaiah and Jeremiah, but even some of the other prophets, that they can see the writing on the wall. They can see the Babylonians coming, right? I mentioned that prophets were often seen as, I think our idea of what a prophet is fortune teller, and I don't think that's accurate, right? Could they did they talk with God? Did they? Yeah, absolutely. But in a way, they were partly that, but also partly like newscaster. They were just looking at the way the world was and telling people, there's that army over there. It's coming this way. So it's not like they're not guessing that this army is coming. They know that the army is coming because people are talking about it, right? And they're just sort of, what they're doing is they're interpreting what that means in a faith-based way. So it's not that they don't see the future, or they don't connect with God in some way, but their primary sort of, the way I like to think of prophets is they're looking at the world and saying, well, why is the world the way it is? Why are we here? And maybe it's because we've done well, or maybe we've done badly, or maybe the people need to behave better, or whatever. It's more they apply the way the world is to how people are acting, right? I'm going to continue in chapter 2. I will stand at my watch post and station myself on the ramparts. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me, and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud, their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. Moreover, wealth is treacherous. The arrogant do not endure. They open their throats wide as Sheol. Like death, they never have enough. They gather all nations for themselves and collect all peoples as their own. So, chapter 2, verse 4, but the righteous live by their faith, or their faithfulness, is that one little half a verse that Paul focused on to say, look, we live by faith, not by works.
Mhm.
And like I said earlier, and then Luther did the same thing with what Paul wrote. Not to say it's not right, but it's funny how it's such a small little half a verse that
Mhm.
gets
Mhm.
expanded by Paul.
Right.
Also, I think it's interesting that verse 2, write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. It's like it's the newspaper of the day, right?
Yeah.
Write it on their tablet and send it out to runners so they can go out and spread the news.
Mhm.
Um, okay.
All right.
Shall not everyone taunt such people and with mocking riddles say about them, alas for you who heap up what is not your own. How long will you load yourselves with goods taken in pledge? Will not your own creditors suddenly rise, and those who make you tremble wake up? Then you will be booty for them. Because you have plundered many nations, all that survive of the peoples shall plunder you, because of human bloodshed and violence to the earth, to cities and all who live in them. Alas for you who get evil gain for your house, setting your nest on high to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples. You have forfeited your life. The very stones will cry out from the wall, and the plaster will respond from the woodwork. Alas for you who build a town by bloodshed and found a city on iniquity. Is it not from the Lord of hosts that people labor only to feed the flames? And nations weary themselves for nothing. But the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Alas for you who make your neighbors drink, pouring out your wrath until they are drunk, in order to gaze on their nakedness. You will be sated with contempt instead of glory. Drink you yourself and stagger. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and shame will come upon your glory. For the violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you. The destruction of the animals will terrify you. Because of human bloodshed and violence to the earth, to cities and all who live in them. What use is an idol once its maker has shaped it, a cast image, a teacher of lies? For its maker trusts in what has been made, though the product is only an idol that cannot speak. Alas for you who say to the wood, wake up, to silent stone, rouse yourself. Can it teach? See, it is gold and silver plated, and there is no breath in it at all. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. This is really, for me, reminiscent of the Beatitudes, not in, I forget if it's Matthew or Luke. One of them has what they call the blessings and then the woes. And in
Mhm.
some woes, it says alas, which just made me think of that.
Mhm.
I think it might be Matthew, actually. I'm not sure. In some translations, the woes are the alas, which I find kind of interesting. It feels a little bit like that. Let me see. in Matthew 5 and Luke 6. There's also, I know I do this a lot, but it's just who I am. There's a song in the musical Godspell, which starts, alas, alas for you, lawyers and Pharisees, hypocrites that you be. Comes directly from Matthew. Yeah, so I was right. Matthew is just the blessed, but Luke, I believe, has blessings and woes. Yeah. It just says woe, but woe to you. But I think there are translations that say, but alas for you who, yeah, it's sort of like a little bit different. It does sort of feel like this list of commandments or beatitudes, doesn't it? Those of you who do this, watch out. And those of you who do that, watch out, right? It kind of, that kind of, a lot about people who hoard up wealth and don't show justice, but a lot of the wealth, evil gain for your house, heap up what is not your own, build a town by bloodshed, make your neighbors drink, which is interesting. And then some about idols, right? Alas for you say to the wood, wake up, who are talking to idols that are just inanimate objects, right?
So it's kind of interesting that first he's talking about the Babylonians coming, and then my Bible says this is the Lord's answer. So at this point, the Babylonians are pretty much here, and they've done all these horrible things. Plus, the people that they've conquered are probably, going along with them because, that's kind of how it happens. You get assimilated like the Borg, and so.
I love that you made a Borg reference. I'm not sure that everyone else understands the Borg reference, but.
I don't.
Oh, sorry, Judy.
It's a Star Trek reference.
It's Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
It's a group of people that assimilate other people, and they cannot.
Okay.
You will be assimilated.
Yes, I hear you. Okay.
And that's kind of what the Babylonians did in these areas, But all these horrible things that they've done, I think, according to what this says, is that God is going to, they're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and I think these alas for you are to the chosen people, but the reason, you who have done all this stuff, see what's going to happen. You're going to be conquered by the Babylonians, and all this wealth you've obtained, it won't mean anything in the end, which was true, especially in the case of the Babylonian exile, where the wealthy were taken away from their land and their stuff into exile. Okay. A prayer of the prophet Habakkuk according to, Shigionoth.
Okay, can we stop right there? What is that? Because it's not capitalized.
Shigionoth, see Psalm 7:1, Selah, musical terms possibly indicating that the prayer may have been used in the temple.
Okay.
When you see, it happens in I think it's a few other places too, but primarily in the Psalms, you'll see a psalm and it'll say Selah, S-E-L-A-H.
Yeah.
And some people said that it may have been some kind of, it's a musical reference. It may be that there's a repeated phrase that gets said there, or it's some kind of musical reference, but we've lost it to time. apparently, and I honestly never noticed that word before, Shigionoth, is also some kind of a musical reference to something.
That's interesting.
O Lord, I have heard of your renown, and I stand in awe, O Lord, of your work. In our own time, revive it. In our own time, make it known. In wrath, may you remember mercy. Oh, here, God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. You see the sellout there. You don't generally read those, but it's there. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. The brightness was like the sun. Rays came forth from his hand, where his power lay hidden. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed close behind. He stopped and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The eternal mountains were shattered. Along his ancient pathway, the everlasting hills sank low. I saw the tents of Cushan under affliction. The tent curtains of the land of Midian trembled. Was your wrath against the rivers, O Lord, or your anger against the rivers, or your rage against the sea? When you drove your horses, your chariots of victory? You brandished your naked bow. Sated were the arrows at your command. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. A torrent of water swept by. The deep gave forth its voice. The sun raised high its hands. The moon stood still in its exalted place. At the light of your arrows speeding by. At the gleam of your flashing spear. In fury you trod the earth. In anger you trampled nations. You came forth to save your people, to save your anointed. You crushed the head of the wicked house, laying it bare from foundation to roof. You pierced with their own arrows the head of his warriors, who came like the whirlwind to scatter us, gloating as if ready to devour the poor who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the mighty waters. I hear and I tremble within. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones, and my steps tremble beneath me. I wait quietly for the day of calamity to come upon the people who attack us. Description of God coming from the southern mountains near Sinai, why it says Cushan and Midian, which are south of there. To defend the people. Yeah, I think you sort of alluded to that, Nancy, about how I don't know if the Babylonians have conquered them yet, but it feels like they're on the doorsteps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because this, and maybe they have, I don't know, but this God's going to come from the south because the Babylonians come from the north, and God's going to support us and vanquish our enemies. Right. I just think it had to have been such a difficult time when they're just recovering from the onslaught of the Assyrians. I mean, when I say just within the last, 25, 50 years, but within a lifetime. And now they see the Babylonians coming on their doorstep.
Yeah.
Right. It's like people coming out of World War I and the Depression, and then here comes World War II right on top of it. It's kind of like, and that was probably a lot closer together than what happened to these people. But when you read about it, it's all compressed. So
well, that's a really good analogy, actually, because one of the causes of World War II wasn't just the rise of Hitler, but it was the economic toll it took on the Germans from World War I that never really got repaired. And people were struggling. They needed something to. I'm not supporting that, for the record, but part of the rise of Hitler was because people were so economically disadvantaged after having gone through World War One. So,
And yet the voices of the leaders, the religious leaders like Bonhoeffer, in those were totally ignored by the common people.
yep. Yeah, I mean, I saw a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon yesterday where Calvin goes to his dad and says something like, why is it that we think world problems will solve when we have young people killing other young people? And I was like, oh, wow. And his dad looks at him and goes, doesn't have an answer, right? You know, that it seems to be our natural, our human natural thing to fight, but nothing ever gets solved by fighting.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Whether it's in individual kind of fights or in wars, right?
And we don't learn from it.
Nope.
Yeah, if we all learned from history, the world would be a different place.
For sure. Well, let's finish these last few verses here. Though the fig tree does not blossom and no fruit is on the vines, though the produce of the olive fails and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the fold and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exult in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and makes me tread upon the heights. To the leader with stringed instruments.
Oh,
Okay.
That's another musical notation for the
Yeah.
whole thing. Yeah. It makes it seem like this is, so the Psalms were often sung. Maybe this was sung, at least the end of this part was sung. At the end of
A
this,
lot of it looks like it could easily have been sung.
yeah, the Salah and
Pretty
those,
much everything from, okay, the whole entire book, but especially from chapter 2 to the end.
yeah. I have a dog bothering me.
I was wondering where your dog were today.
They're here in the office. Say hi, Leah.
Oh, there she
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
No, get your nose out of there. It's interesting that I love when it's not about, so there's a couple different responses to hardship in scripture like this. It's my fields are going to be overflowing because of God's love and help for me, or even though things are going to be bad, I'll still trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
It tends to be one of those two, and this is one of those that I know that I'm going to have these hardships because of what's coming, but I'll still trust in God, which is
Yes.
pretty awesome, pretty faithful.
Yes. Yes.
You know, I said this before, but about each of these minor prophets of reading, I haven't read a lot of them, and we don't hear them much in church. I'm sort of they're surprisingly poetic. Like this, the language is so beautiful.
even though they're talking about really horrible things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like when he was talking about the Babylonians, and now I can't remember which chapter it was, but he mentions that they strip Lebanon, cut down all the wood,
Yep.
they kill all the animals. They, I mean, it is quite poetic, but it's really horrible what they did.
Well, yeah. I mean, and this is a prophet saying bad things are coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like the newscaster of the day, bad things are coming. And they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did.
Still do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a quick book too. We're done in a half hour.
Yeah.
We could continue on with the next book, but we're not going to. The next book is even shorter, Zephaniah,
Uh-huh.
going in order through the minor prophets. And we won't have Bible study next week. I'm going to celebrate a good friend's 50th birthday up in Santa Fe next week on Thursday.
Oh,
So
good for you.
going to be up
I
there.
thought you were going to that conference thing. No? When is that? What week is that?
Which conference thing?
That was on your calendar in your office. That was that week. I thought, is that already come and gone? And the days gone by so fast, I didn't even know. No pay attention.
Not this week, no.
Oh, okay, all right. Pay no
Uh,
attention to the man behind the curtain, you know.
I have a lot of different meetings and conferences coming up, but not this week. Nope. Yeah, well, thank you all. Any exciting, interesting news from Christmas?
No, but it sounded like the 4 o'clock service was amazing, and I'm really sorry I didn't make it. I had people show up at 3 o'clock from Alaska that I had not expected. And by the time they left, I'm
Wow.
afraid I couldn't have driven a straight line right down Country Club, let alone get into the church.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how much later. So, 60 people, it sounded beautiful. I mean,
We had
it's huge.
I think I don't know about 60. I think we had, well, maybe it was either 40 or 50. I can't remember.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we had the fellowship time was really great. I brought about 6 dozen cookies, and Jesse made pozole,
Ah,
and we had hot cocoa and other things. It was great. And then we had our late service, the drive-in movie. Most of the people that stayed had been at the earlier service, so we just set up chairs, and we did have a couple cars, and we put the screen right outside my office window here, so it was a little sheltered from the wind. It was a little windy, but it wasn't too bad. We thought it would be better to have the screen be a little more protected from the wind. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.